Hey, what's going on? My name's Ian. I like making cards, and today I wanted to make a card for the game Dredge and dive into the terrifying stories surrounding the fishermen in the game. So let's go. In the early 1900s, a lonely fisherman would often be found quietly stalking New England's waters. Every night, he would throw out his net and let the ambitious sea steer and sway its boat. And every night, he would trudge home hauling a sack of fish and reeking of booze. He would often lie in bed, unable to rest, as if his body was protesting his every action. Even though his solitary life had never troubled him before, he felt like a part of himself was missing, something so crucial to life he was drowning without it. But he didn't know what it was, and he didn't know how to find out what it was. So he took a job, a fishing contract far away from his empty house, in a town called Marrow. Setting sail in the morning, he planned to make it there by nightfall. The clear, crisp morning made the waters forgiving for most of his trip. But just as he was nearing his destination, a strong, thick fog followed the setting sun and soon enveloped his surroundings. Spotting a lighthouse in the distance, he knew he was close, but only finding out how close after a loud crack was heard from beneath the deck, and the ship came to a jolting stop. Noticing a sudden and drastic intake of water at his feet, he dreaded the size of the damage and quickly began surveying his surroundings for dry land. His distracted thoughts led to a misstep, causing him to trip and bang his head on the hard wooden deck, shortly after losing consciousness on his half-sunken vessel. When he next opened his eyes, they were laid on a very rotund man. Before even being able to process his surroundings, the man had begun spewing out words, and through the ringing in his ears, he only picked up a couple of them. Something about him being the mayor, and how his ship was destroyed in the wreck. Finally focusing on what the man was saying, the mayor had given the fisherman a new ship, but indebting the fisherman to the town, and in order to pay the town back, he would need to work for them. Hesitant to the strange position the mayor had put him in, but seeing no other options, he accepted. Days passed as the fisherman slowly became more acquainted with his new ship and the few faces that rest in the small town. The town of Marrow is split into two small close islands. The smaller island in the east, adequately called Little Marrow, and a large island in the west, called Greater Marrow, which is where most of the fisherman's business takes place. Runs to the fishmonger to offload his hauls, and repairs and upgrades of the shipwright. Filled with mostly friendly faces, except for one old woman living in the lighthouse, who for some reason didn't like the fisherman's presence. The first time seeing the fisherman, her eyes focused on his, as if they were finding an old familiar face, even though he had never met her before. The lighthouse keeper explained how he didn't belong in Marrow, and how he should leave the town alone. Disturbed by the old woman's remarks, but seeing no way out of the town with his debt, he chalked it up to an old deteriorating brain finding old souls in new bodies, and continued his work. Days passed smoothly with countless fish caught and traps set, until one night, after staying out on the water longer than the fisherman knew better to, in his last batch, there was a discolored mackerel in the bunch. Not thinking much of it, he picked it up to throw it back in the sea, only to look down and see 5 beady red eyes staring right back at him. Unlike any other dusty blue mackerel, this one had dark brown hue stretching across its entire body, and had seemingly grown 3 extra dark red eyes. The fish's veins were pulsing with a vibrant purpley black ooze, and in its fruitless attempts to break free from the fisherman's grasp, its dark, ghoulish, vivid organs had begun spewing out, despite no damage having been inflicted on the creature. The air was then suddenly filled with a booming sound of a foghorn, looking up to find another ship piercing through the thick fog headed towards the fisherman. The closer the ship grew, the more noticeable every familiar detail became, until he realized that it was a perfect copy of his own, barreling towards his own ship and showing no efforts of slowing down. The fisherman had quickly resorted to escaping back to the island, unsure if the lighthouse's light would protect him from the now clear giant anglerfish chasing down his boat. Once finally arrived at the dock, the fisherman looked back to see the same silhouette of his ship retreat back into the fog. While not able to fully understand what he just saw, he knew that the night in this place had a way of tricking you, making you see things that it wanted you to see, and now he knew how dangerous it could be. So consumed by trying to make sense of the ghost ship, he had almost completely forgotten about the mutated fish he had captured. When he took it to the fishmonger, he explained to the fisherman that these fish are corrupted and are known as aberrations. warning him that there are more, each horrific and grotesque in their own way, and how the fisherman should bring any more he finds to him so he can study and research them. While cutting up the five-eyed mackerel, the fishmonger pulled out a long-lost handkerchief and gave it to the fisherman. Now completely lost and confused to what seemed to be going on around him, the fisherman returned to his ship, only to be unexpectedly greeted by a man lurking beneath the deck. The man explains how he's a collector, and the handkerchief in his hands was an extremely valuable relic. Now even more suspicious of the mysterious man, the collector calms the fisherman by clarifying that he's able to give something to the fisherman to trade for the handkerchief, showing the fisherman the dredging equipment on the dock. The collector spells out to the fisherman that he can use the equipment to loot from all the crashed ships around the Marrow, on account of the fog that seeps across the waters each night. Pleading a case that makes the equipment sound invaluable, the fisherman hands over the handkerchief without a second thought, and accompanies the collector back to his home south of the Marrow. There, he sells the fisherman on the idea of collecting more relics for him, assuring him that he will be well rewarded for his efforts. Though still skeptical, the fisherman hesitantly accepts after being given a map with 5 markers on it for 5 relics. The fisherman took the day to think about the offer, rationalizing how he's just an old, rich man who likes antique things, but the reasonable side of him knows that that's a lie, and wonders just what he wants to do with the relics and what they're capable of. Tempted by the reward promised to him and noticing how close the first relic was, he decided just to go see what lay lying for him. Finding the silhouette of half of a fairly large boat peeking through the waves' perpetual motion, he used the new dredging equipment and pulled out mostly rotting planks and nails, unsure of what he was even trying to find. After hours had passed, he wondered if the collector was just playing a joke on the new face in town, and was just sitting back and laughing at him. But that's when he heard a tiny clink on the deck. Falling from the crane was a shiny golden key. Picking it up, the fisherman found it to be unnaturally heavy despite its size, and even though it had been lost for however long and vulnerable to the sea, it looked as though it was brand new. This had to be the relic the collector was looking for. When packing up to show the collector what he found, the fisherman noticed he was being watched, but not as anything as tame as a human, but by a colossal brown spiky fin shining out of the water, each time submerging and re-emerging closer and closer. The fisherman prayed that the light from the lighthouse would once again dissuade the creature, just like the last one, but he had to make it to the other side of the island first. Thanks to a visit to the shipwright the day before, his engine was noticeably faster than the creature, and he knew he'd be able to outrun it. However, he'd have to get it up and running in time. Closer now, the fisherman was able to see the sheer overwhelming size of the beast, matching that of a whale, but with teeth as wide as the boat itself, and a mouth so large it could effortlessly consume 5 boats all at once. The fisherman now picking up the pace, and the Leviathan slowly drifting further and further away, as the yellow glow from the lighthouse became brighter and brighter. That's gonna have to do it for part 1 of the Dredge. If you guys liked my art in this story, make sure you like the video, and let me know in the comments if you want to see any more. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you later.